Okie doke. Well, welcome aboard, everybody. Actually, aside from Bob's lamenting that Washington is doing absolutely nothing positive, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world of solar. I was surprised. We've had a few weeks of minimal news, but there's a heck of a lot of stuff. One of the things I found interesting, Energy Sage has joined in with Intuit. Intuit is the TurboTax people, the Quicken people. They've got a thing they're calling the Intuit Climate Action Marketplace. And I was looking at it, it seems like a whole lot of PR. They're talking about helping small businesses reduce their carbon footprint. But when I was reading behind the lines or beneath the lines or where lines don't exist, it struck me that they're kind of gearing themselves up for perhaps a carbon credit marketplace, to get an accounting software company involved in all of this. Sounds like there's, at least on their part, a speculation that there is going to be a market for managing carbon footprint from a saleability regulatory standpoint, and they're kind of getting themselves in place for that. So maybe, Bob, you're going to start seeing some of the carbon credit stuff. If not here in the US, certainly in other countries where that's going to become a real business, is complying with all of these governmental pricing structures for carbon. So we'll see how that works out. The ITC, the investment tax credit, the tariff, the interstate or International Trade Commission, investment, all these same acronyms. The International Trade Commission is meeting tomorrow about the solar tariffs. And if you recall, these were put in place in 2016, started out at, I think, 25%, have declined to 15% in 2021, but they're set to go away in February of 2022. There have been some petitions to extend these tariffs on imported solar. Predictably, from people who make their solar panels here in the United States, they're wanting to extend it 17% in 2022, 16 in 23, 15 in 24, and 14 in 25. So that's the proposal that's in front of them. But what I found interesting is a couple of things. One is, first off, US only has 1/5 of the manufacturing capacity to meet domestic demand. So they say that we have the capacity, the production capacity of about 8 gigawatts per year, with demand at about 30 gigawatts per year. I have to assume some of that 8 gigawatts gets exported. So, because it's never clean. But so we're only producing at best 1/5 of what we need. So I don't know if that's either here nor there. It's just that this 4 years of tariffs has not really spurned the growth that I think some of the people anticipated, if that truly was their aim. But another thing I found interesting is there is zero solar cell production domestically. So that's funny, because all the cells have to be imported and then they're compiled into modules here in the United States. So I don't know.
Where are those made, Jay? Are those all in China or Taiwan?
It didn't say, but I would assume it's probably the same. Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, Vietnam. Those are kind of the big ones. China, of course. Okay. I would assume that's where almost all of it comes from. Lion's share, probably China. But I don't know that there's a tariff on cells. I think there's only a tariff on modules. So that's, I just found that interesting. I don't know what to make of it. It's just, I thought it was interesting. The California requirement, where I know I mentioned this a while ago, call it the C10 licensing thing. Essentially, they were trying to make all solar installed by licensed electricians instead of licensed solar installers. Currently in California, you can get your solar installation license without being an electrician per se. They're trying to do away with that. The Contractor State Licensing Board, sort of out of the blue, came up with this rule, which would put about 90% of the installers out of business in California. It was pushed through by the IBEW, surprise, surprise. And that's the electrical union, if you guys aren't familiar with those guys. I used to have quite a lot of dealings with them. But fortunately, a judge stepped in and said, hey, if you're going to make a rule like this, you got to have public hearings about it. And so it's been put on hold for at least a year. So that's a big deal in California. The U.S. Department of Energy has announced that they've got a community solar standard that is seeking to increase community solar by 700% over the next 4 years. There's a lot of activity in community solar. I don't think that's overly surprising. My cynical take on that is this is a way to maintain centralized distribution of energy. You know, I think community solar is a good thing, but I think they're trying to aggregate solar into big projects that have to be managed and distributed. So that fits a utility type model as opposed to a distributed model. But bearing in mind, a lot of facilities, a lot of places simply don't have, they're not suitable for solar, you know, so there is a place for community solar, and it certainly has economies of scale there. But I think a lot of government is starting to push it, as seen by, I talked about last week, Ohio is pushing a community solar process. And that's actually coming from Republican representatives. So Arizona removed the grid access fee for solar, which is interesting. They had put a thing in place charging $100 a year if you had solar, claiming that solar added to the cost of electricity on the grid. So they've removed that, which is good. Everybody who ever looked at it said it was nonsense. You know, to a point, adding solar capacity to the grid actually reduces the cost of operating the grid. Once you get beyond a certain point, whatever that point is, who knows, but you get down into the duck curve, and then it probably does become a realistic expense. But solar does add capacity during peak periods of demand. So it's a good thing. My guess is probably up to about 30% of grid capacity. After that, I think the utilities have a right to really gripe. But before that, I think they're just griping in anticipation of a problem that hasn't occurred yet. Doomsaying once again, which I don't know, is it just me, but is every news report reporting every news item as a catastrophe? I just feel like, really? How many times is it our last chance to survive Armageddon? You know, it's like, anyway, you know. All right, so they're saying more than half of the utility scale projects worldwide are threatened due to supply chain issues. So we're going to see 2022 probably not meeting some of the targeted that it might have if the system was working smoothly. As an example of that, module costs, which had dropped to the cost of producing a solar panel, had dropped to below 20 cents per watt, has bumped back up to 28 cents per watt. So that's the manufacturing cost, not the wholesale, not the retail. And shipping costs have increased 500%. So those are some of the issues that the marketplace is facing. And they're releasing some of the details of the Build Back Better bill as coming through the Manchin filter to see how it affects solar, which I guess I saw something that Joe Manchin is now saying maybe he doesn't even support what he just supported, but maybe not. but maybe.
To be clear, Jay, what he supported was not what they produced.
Okay, well, that's fair. If that's the
Yeah.
case, then you say, hey, guys, I've been in contract negotiations like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
it's like,
this is
that ain't
they're
what I
they're
said,
bid.
buddy.
Oh yeah, they're bidding back and forth to each other. Presumably, he wants something.
Yep. All right. Yeah, I think he wants, well, I won't, I'll let Bob say which after government jobs he wants. But anyway, 10-year, they're proposing a 10-year extension on the investment tax credit. So that's a big deal for the solar industry for sure. And that has gotten through the Manchin Acts. The refundability, so if you're not paying taxes enough to take advantage of the credit, you can get money back. So it's basically a tax refund rather than a credit if you don't need the credit. So essentially, it's a refund that's applied to your taxes if you have to pay taxes. And battery only for the ITC, that's another thing that they pushed through. We're starting to see a lot of projects. Already, if you're installing batteries with solar, it qualifies. Now they're saying if you're just installing batteries without solar, without wind, without anything else, it will qualify as a renewable energy project. And they're increasing the EV tax credit up to $12,500 for an electric vehicle, which is quite interesting to me. And I guess, I mean, I don't want to say it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, man, if you look at the pricing projections on electric vehicles, we just did a podcast on this, and they're showing there's a term, I think it's Wright's law. Bob, you may know, or Don, I mean, you may know, I think it's Wright's. It's this thing saying basically as you double capacity, you will reduce the cost of production by 28% or something. This was some production guy back in the 1930s saying that. And so if you apply that to EVs, which has followed that trend line pretty straightforward in history, really in about 3 years, the average cost of an EV is going to be $18,000. So if we have an $18,000 electric vehicle with a $12,500 tax credit, that's a deal. I mean, sign me up. I'll go out and get it.
Tesla announced that they're coming out with a vehicle next year at $19,000.
19, yeah. I think we're going to see that. In fact, actually the best-selling car in the world is one produced by a Chinese company. It's an electric vehicle, and it sells for about $4,600. When I was looking at it, it looks not much better than a four-wheel scooter, you know, as far as capacity. It's certainly an urban vehicle. I think it had a top speed of 62 miles per hour or something like that. But you know, I think we're going to really see the EV market change a lot when the Chinese vehicles and the Indian vehicles hit worldwide distribution, you know, where the price point is starting to be competitive. At the moment, they've been featuring, like Tesla came out originally with their like $120,000 vehicle. And we're starting to see Ford Lightnings that can be a price tag up to $80,000. And, you know, it's been a luxury market primarily, but we're going to start seeing some Yugos come into the marketplace here. And
yeah, the Yugo, the Trabi didn't make it very well, you know.
No, they didn't. And certainly not in the American market, but worldwide, you start getting into a lot of these, you know, India, China, these are the main marketplaces for auto dealers, for automobile manufacturers. We're all US centric, but you know, the US is just part of a larger picture. So
Jay, did they mention whether or not they're going to still have the EV credits tied to manufacturing? I think it was the first 100,000 or something per manufacturer. Is it still tied to that? Or
they didn't mention that. They didn't mention if plug-in hybrids, because they weren't included in previous versions. My guess is they wouldn't be. That whole manufacturing capacity thing seemed weird and cumbersome.
Yeah.
You know,
You're taking a shot if you hope you get your car before the limit was reached.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, we here in the Midwest, I know not everybody's here in the Midwest, but like when we ordered our plug-in hybrid, we had to wait 6 months because they only allocated 4 vehicles for the Midwestern United States. Everything else went to California and Arizona.
4?
Yeah, 4 vehicles, Toyota. It was a Toyota, you know, really 4 cars coming in. So, you know, and our dealership kept sending us little emails saying it's on a boat coming from Japan, you know, so, oh, good. So, who knows? We're going to see. I think, you know, the electric vehicle marketplace is just such a game changer. So that's going to be in flux for a while. All right, so that was the news I had. Did anybody else have any questions, anything to share with the group at the moment? Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, I'm investigating electric bike.
Yeah.
So it goes about 20 to 25 miles an hour. Lithium-ion battery, range about 50 miles. So that's a new center of people buying those groups and using them.
Yeah,
Is it-
I would be careful not to mention it around your computer because my wife and I were talking about electric bikes and now all I get are ads for electric bikes.
Yeah.
So,
Really?
yeah. So I think you're already going to start seeing advertisements. So, anybody else? Oh yeah, Eric.
Yeah, I bought a couple of electric bikes for my wife and I a while back, and you get ruined pretty quick. Everybody, you know, you love to ride them. The park is now picked up too, and the e-bikes that I run at home, I charge on the solar generator that we made in your class.
Oh, well,
They'll
that's nice.
certainly recharge them. So I'm running completely on solar.
Do they work okay in hills? I would imagine where it's flat, like where Bob is, where a hill is, you know, a mountain is like the highway overpass. But,
No, they work pretty well. Roger Coulter has one, and he went up to Noble County, which is the next county north of us, and he basically used that electric assist quite a bit. So I mean, I wouldn't say they work in San Francisco great, but they work pretty good around here. Southeastern Ohio is pretty hilly.
yeah.
Yeah, I put one through the tests. I took it to Clear Creek State Park, which is a lot of very steep terrain, and rode it primarily just on the throttle just to see what I would get out of it. And I probably did 18 miles, hunting mushrooms basically, but put it through its paces and it still held up.
Yeah, if you get a 750 watt motor in there, that will carry hills.
Uh-huh.
I'm getting a 250 watt motor because I'm cheap
Uh-huh.
and stay on the flat land.
Yeah. Okay, doke. Anybody else have anything to add before I get to my subject du jour? All right, I'll mention there was a really good seminar last week for Solar Edge for their new battery system that they're announcing. And I can throw into the comments section here a link where you can get that seminar online. I will warn you, one of the people on the panel was Chinese and he spoke a lot and I have no idea what he said, but it was very informative. So
Well, he wasn't that bad.
no, he wasn't horrible, but I found it distracting. I'll just say that. But it was a good seminar. It was a good seminar. And anyway, the thing that I made a note of and I wanted to follow up for this week was they were talking about load management, you know, remote load management from their devices. And we've talked a bit about how the solar market, at least at the residential level and at the commercial level, is very much in the middle of a transition from straight solar to solar plus batteries. That will be the norm in pretty much every situation. Well, now it seems to me everybody's gearing up, in addition to batteries, to remote load management. And that's going to be something that you're going to have to build into your portfolio of product, or at least in your mind. And with that in mind, this week in all of the news, there were actually 4 different announcements that were right in remote load management. So what I'm talking about specifically, well, they're happening in different ways. Schneider just announced what they're calling their smart circuit relay. So it's essentially a main service panel where every breaker can be managed remotely through your phone. So you can divert loads, turn off loads, monitor usage at the circuit breaker level, so that you can see where your power is going, when it's being used. A lot of what they're promoting there is, let's say you've got an AC coupled or a DC coupled system, the grid goes down, you can then start turning off loads that you've determined are not critical. Hot water heater, turn down your thermostat, I guess. I wouldn't think you could do that at circuit breaker. It's probably an all or nothing thing. But you'll see your battery capacity on your phone. You can decide if you want to charge your electric vehicle simply from solar when all other loads are being met. So they were talking about predictive load usage as well, where the Solar Edge thing was saying that their system is tied into NOAA, I think it was, the National Weather Forecasting, to say if a storm is approaching your area, it will then make changes to make sure that your batteries are fully topped off before the storm hits. So it would pull power from the grid, even if your batteries, so that you're preparing for it. It might divert power from your charging on your electric vehicle, whatever. So we start seeing not only load management in a real-time basis, where you can go into your phone and say, I want my water to be heated from this time to that time. I want my car charging to take place from this time to that time. And they just had little slide bars on their phone. So Solar Edge was promoting that, although I think that's more theoretical at the moment than actual. But it's definitely there on the drawing board. Schneider announcing, and it's funny, the example they used was, imagine you've left your home and you're worried that you left your oven on, so you could go back in and turn off your oven. I don't know how realistic that is, how many people decide that's going to ruin their day, but there's other better uses for it. It's sort of like smart appliances. They always say your refrigerator will know when to order ketchup. That's not your most critical need. So who knows about, but definitely being able to manage load. And they were talking about, you could set up this Solar Edge thing so that your car is essentially a load dump. So if you're on standalone mode, the grid is down, if all of your load demands are being met, then you can set it up so that's when you will begin to charge your car. So you will not charge your car until all other load demand is met, and you'll only use your vehicle charging when there's excess energy available. Things like that, which would be quite handy, quite helpful. Another company called Span Drive just announced this week an EV charger that is an EV charger integrated into a load panel. Apparently this is designed, they kept referring to them as meter/panels. So I'm assuming this is, I've seen pictures in California a lot where the whole service panel is outdoors integrated in with the electrical meter. I've got something sort of like that at my place. It's a service panel with only 4 breakers attached to a meter. So they're talking about one of the advantages there is you can hook up your solar, your EV charger up to 48 amps without having to worry about the capacity of your existing service panel, because it integrates between the meter and the existing service panel, I guess. So you're bypassing it. And they said it was fully remote load managed, so all of these breakers in there are load managed. And Eaton just announced they've got a smart breaker pilot program. And so what they're saying is it's not the panels themselves, it's the breakers, each individually, that is, I guess, Bluetooth enabled or something, but it allows for monitoring and management of that breaker. So clearly there's got to be some sort of communication device with that, whether it just simply integrates through Wi-Fi, through the web. I don't know. They didn't go into the detail there, but it did look like it takes up another slot in your service panel, which seems like a real downside. So if it's a double pole breaker, it's actually going to be a triple pole breaker. If it's a single pole, it'll be a double pole. So you're going to have a lot of space on your service panel, because the communications portion, the management portion, was a full nother pole, essentially. Whether it connects to the bus bar or not, I don't know, but it takes up the space anyway. So that was interesting. And then Solar Edge, if you remember, Don, I'm assuming you watched that seminar. They were talking in the question and answer about how are they doing this monitoring. They said they're integrating remote, basically plug sensors. You plug the device into it, almost like one of those Wise smart plug things, where you can manage the load, but you're managing it close to the load, wherever you're plugging it into, not at the circuit breaker level. So I would guess that gives you a lot of flexibility for sure, although a lot of complexity, a lot of potential places for things to break. And my first thought in all of this is, you hear the marketing hype and it all sounds great. You can manage everything. Of course, nothing ever seems to work quite so seamlessly for me when I try and use these things. But it strikes me as a lot of potential hacking heaven to start being able to go in and manage every single one of your loads, positively or negatively. So I just was wondering what everybody's perspective is on this, and what issues they see in the world of solar for us.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, I think the monitoring it's nice to be able to trip them back and forth, but to your point, no telling who else could trip them too, but the monitoring sounded good to me, at least as far as being able to tell. I've got a place that's remote, so I can tell what's on or what's off, or if all of a sudden there's a spike, I know if it's the pump for the water or something, as opposed to something else going off.
Yeah, it would also give you a better indication just where your power drain is. Is it an old refrigerator is using up 30% of all your electricity that you're consuming? Is it a hot water heater that's really messing with your life? Is it your electric vehicle charging? So knowledge is power, but I'm always a little skeptical about complexity. Bob, you had a question or a statement?
Well, what I wanted to add was I literally started looking at solar about 35, 40 years ago. And I was 12. And at that point, they had over here a house that was literally built by NIGAS, the gas company. And they used solar on it, which wasn't a high efficiency panels in any way whatsoever. 7-volt, your water heating panels seems to be more efficient. Anyway, I took ASHRAE courses and I went out and tried to do energy audits on people's houses. The main thing that was hit at that time is to tighten up your house, tighten up your windows, tighten up getting more insulation and stuff like that, so that the demand of the requirements on solar for heating and air conditioning was literally half of what it would have been if you didn't go through this. And I think that that's sort of something that has been missed from the beginning. The new house constructions, I don't see really getting into very tight constructions, and the windows may be better than they used to be, but I think that the grassroots on that is an excellent place to start your plans for solar.
Yeah, one of the concerns, I've had, and I know other people have, is as energy gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, energy efficiency becomes less and less of a priority. Because when things are cheap and abundant, we tend to be very wasteful. But energy efficiency has always been the first choice, the first best investment of your money. But that may be changing. I mean, it may be speed of construction is the issue, or materials. I don't say it's a good thing. I think it's just probably what's going to be the pressure point.
Jay, you and I both know that the gas bills and all electric bills are subsidized by the government. I would love it that the subsidy would go away and let the individuals actually see how much they're charging for their gas and their electric. Then all of a sudden, something's going to change there. They're still
Yeah,
paying for
you're
it.
talking about the true cost of whatever it is.
So it's
you
not
know,
going down, it's going up, Jay.
the cradle to cradle, yeah, but we don't, it's like when you have a renter who doesn't pay their own utilities, it's built into their rent, they tend not to be as aware of the waste than if they're responsible for paying the utilities. So
No
That's-
consequences, no change.
that's right, yep. Well, I think, any other comments on the whole idea of the monitoring, the complexity there? I think from my perspective, just as kind of a 30,000 foot view, it seems to me the installation of solar, the solar itself is getting easier and easier and easier. The plug and play, when we start talking about microinverters, the rails, the panels, that kind of thing is getting simple, but the commissioning of the system, the monitoring of the system, that's getting more and more complex. I mean, I can see a time, we ran into this on one level when we did an install in Pennsylvania there. In fact, I think maybe Eric, you might have been involved in the one there at Quiet Creek. And we were done with the install by noon, but it took all afternoon to get the communication system working, to get the monitoring done. So it's like 6 hours to install and 6 hours to get the software to work. And if we as installers are now dealing with remote monitoring at the individual circuit level, who is going to get called for that? Who is going to have to troubleshoot that? Is it going to be the electrician? Are we going to have to see every single install require a brand new service panel just because of all the bells and whistles that are included in these solar systems that are being installed? Because already we're seeing, it's like the solar array may only be $10,000, but it's another $2,000 to install a new service panel. And that's something that we as installers can't really do. You got to get an electrician involved to do that. So I don't know. It's going to change the dynamics of the marketplace quite a lot.
Well, I tell you, I don't think that most of the installs that's happening in Chicago is to code. I have to tell you, it was really thrilling and fun to listen to all the codes that you went through your class on how many wires at what gauge into a conduit for how many feet and what was it. Come on, they're not doing that out here. They're just shoving THHN 12 gauge through whatever they can get through and stuff like that. So we're not talking apples to oranges here. The complexities are in actually knowing what you're doing. And a lot of people don't really know what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's for sure. And of course, many of the old homes, even are still using antiquated systems. I know it wasn't too many years ago when I lived down in Florida where we had the knob and tube electrical wiring system in the house, with push button light switches and stuff like that. So that place would certainly need a complete rewiring before it could accept solar. So probably should have it regardless. So, all right.
Doesn't Enphase have like a current monitoring module that so you can get to per panel production? Is that just for the panels? I don't have it, so I don't know, but I remember seeing you could add that on so you could actually look at your generation on a minute by minute thing and usage and see how much you're using versus what you're sending back to the grid.
Yeah, they do that. Not really as what you're using versus what you. Actually, the newer systems do. They have those little. They call them CTs that go on to the mains. So, but they're just monitoring it usage from each line on the mains perspective.
Okay.
As opposed to a breaker by breaker monitoring system. Yeah, there's Bob's holding up his little monitoring thing. Most all of the systems now, because they have a module electronic device that's attached, even Enphase, SolarEdge, even the string inverters have those. I think they're almost all produced by Tygo that go onto the module. So you can monitor production at the panel level pretty easily. Right. But monitoring consumption, and this is something they've been talking about in the literature and on podcasts for a while, is the utility has always been set up to deal with supply management. But now we're talking about load management and load management at the individual consumer level. And now with this, we're talking about load management at the circuit level, the individual circuit level. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. And it's certainly going to make life with the utility a little more difficult, a little more confusing, because they're complaining that they no longer control all of the supply. We have distributed generation that gets integrated. Well, now they're not in charge of the load management either. Individuals are making those decisions. So it's going to be a very complex system. Probably not one that works right all the time or almost ever. So, all right. Anybody else have anything to add for the good of the cause? All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Take care.